outwardly religious. The basic theme of all mythology, said Joseph Campbell, is that there is an invisible plane supporting this visible one. This plane transcends, goes beyond the pairs of opposites that characterize the visible plane and with which the rational aspect of the human mind is occupied. And the point of mysticism is that we humans have the capacity, a non-rational, a trans-rational capacity to identify with and to experience that invisible plane. And how? Why is that so? Again, because in our deepest being, we belong to that invisible plane. It is at the root of all things, ourselves included. You are that, say the Hindu mystics, Tat Twam Asi. That you are. In your most essential self, you are one with it. And by stilling your active, ego-oriented, rational mind, you can connect with deeper mind or recognize the connection that is always there. And then finally, theism. What does a theistic faith look like in a modern worldview? And within liberal religion. Well, first, it is necessary to let go of the old theism. It's necessary to let go of the old deity that is associated with an outgrown cosmology in which the earth was the center of the creation and humans the center of the earth, and a sometimes loving, sometimes vengeful, patriarchal deity watching, directing, and intervening from the heavens just above the clouds. That deity, as philosopher Frederick Nietzsche said 100 years ago, is dead. That is to say, that concept of God doesn't work anymore within a modern worldview, and so clean the slate and rework your concept of God just as we have reworked our concept of the cosmos. One reworking of the theistic concept is the process philosophy of Alfred North Whitehead and the process theology of theologians like Charles Hartshorne, Henry Nelson Wyman, John Cobb, David Ray Griffith. The work of these theologians provide examples of modern theistic paradigms, though with significant individual differences. But the key to their work, as I understand it, is that there is a purpose and direction working itself out in the universe. Creative cosmic consciousness, if you will, is present and at work in the universe, and it's operating in and through an evolutionary process. It's kind of like a forward-pushing urge in the direction of developing increased complexity, greater consciousness, and even moral discernment. And we humans, as a product of this ongoing evolutionary process, are not an aberration or an accident or an indifferent experiment in that scheme of things, but rather we are an illustration of that cosmic direction and a clue to what it is all about. And we can find meaning, we can find purpose in our own lives then by cooperating with this ongoing cosmic process and by being co-creators with it. There are no guarantees of success in either individual life or in cosmic life in process philosophy or process theology. It has given up some of the power of God in order to maintain the moral goodness of God. And so what you find in process theology is a push, a direction, an ongoing creative process in which one is invited, more than that, one is urged to take your place in this great cosmic adventure, to find your role in it, and to make your creative contribution to it, however small that might be. Modern theism, like traditional theism, is relational in both content and in approach. Mysticism has to do with identity and union with the powers that be. Theism has to do with relationship, with partnership, with communion, rather than union. And so in theism, one is interested to address the powers that be, to be in an I-thou relationship, as the Jewish theologian Martin Buber put it, so that there's a line of communication and an experience of engagement and even companionship. And I think to find yourself drawn to a theistic perspective, you don't even have to absolutely be convinced that there is a depth dimension to reality. I don't think you absolutely have to believe intellectually that there is some kind of universal wisdom in reality at large. I think you simply have to be willing to approach reality as if there were something akin to human consciousness at work in reality, or maybe even less than that, simply to say, I do better when I approach reality in this way. I do better when I assume that there is a wisdom or consciousness in things. I do better when I assume that there is an invisible plane with which I can communicate. I don't know exactly what I'm tapping into. Who knows what the eternal is, but I find in practice that it brings out a better part of me. I feel more compassionate. I feel more alive and more connected. And so in the end, theism seems to me to be a response of the heart. It seeks relationship. It seeks connection. It seeks communion. And it's like the humanist perspective in some ways, but it's unlike it in that it seeks connection with planes of reality not visible to human eyes. In the theist approach, there is something at the heart of reality that connects to our heart, something that we can understand and to which we can relate, a power for goodness that matches our own sense of goodness, something akin to our human notion of goodness and love is present at the heart of the universe and is trying to break through, and occasionally, maybe even more than occasionally, this reality of goodness and love does break through, and when we meet it, when we experience it, when we respond to it, maybe even when we help to create it, then we have connected with that dimension of reality that carves a hole in our hearts that can only be filled with its own white fire of loving kindness. Phew. No, I'm not finished yet. Just a little addendum. So those are the four models that Fred Campbell has identified that I have found helpful in my work in Port Townsend. The first sermon series I gave there in the fall of 2004 had to do with these four faiths, and I found at that time I was doing an adult religious education class, also from Fred Campbell, and I found doing that class that our congregation was pretty well evenly divided with those four faiths, and that what it did was to provide a language for identifying their own positions, but also a language to talk across between those four faiths. And then one more thing, it's challenging as a minister, I'm sure Fred Wooden knows this, to figure out how to address the needs of a congregation of four basic faiths and variations within it. And a number of times I said over the years to the congregation in Port Townsend that if I knew that I was speaking only to the humanists, or only to the naturalists, or only to the mystics, or only to the theists, I would create very different services. So I had been saying that over the years, and then 2 years ago, I took myself up on it, and I did another 5-week sermon series. I gave an introduction, and then each of the next 4 weeks, I created a service with my target being a humanist, naturalist, mystic, or theist. Not only, I took the question was a theological question, the question of God, and not only was the content of the sermon different with each of those four perspectives, but I dressed differently, I arranged the chairs differently, you can't do that here, I had either more or less ritual, et cetera, et cetera. It was great fun. For further inquiry into these four faiths, I recommend to you Fred Campbell's book, Religious Integrity for Everyone, A Functional Theology for Secular Society. If you want further elucidation of my own approach to these, you can check our website, quf.org in Port Townsend. And if you ever get out there, be sure to give us a visit. Flossie is a great tour guide. It's been great being with you this morning in this magnificent sanctuary, hearing the organ. This place holds so many memories.